Well, there's so many things that my guest does, and if I were to list all of them, it would take forever. So I guess I should just ask him what he doesn't do, and then maybe we have a conversation for a few minutes because there's a lot that he does. We're going to touch on so much of it. It is Jeff Moore, former college coach in tennis, was the women's head coach at University of Texas, was also a college head coach at Colorado, and he does so much more. Has a book out. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into his life and his story and everything he's all about on the Honest Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley. And Jeff, it's fun to reconnect. I know we were on a couple of broadcasts together with the American Athletic Conference and their men's tennis conference championship with the great guys at L2 Productions and ESPN Plus. And now we get to see you in another light, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed our one little time there with the AAC Men's
What did you
Championship. That was fun. That
what
was
did you
fun.
enjoy most about it? Because I did as well. I felt like we really did flow. What were your takeaways from that?
Well, it was just fun to be able to watch and to really comment and really observe how the players competed, uh, their body language, the problems they had to solve, and just watch the whole dynamic of that unfold. And we had a great match. I mean, a team came down from 4-3 zip, wasn't it? I think, which rarely happens, much
Yeah.
less in a conference championship. I think it was 3 zip.
And then I
They were
think it
headed
was 4-2.
4-2. That's right. That's right. And that rarely happens, much less in a championship match. It's unheard of. So we had an exciting match.
We really did. And if we were to think about how even to this day you are competitive, where does that show itself?
Where I'm competitive,
Yeah, to this day.
uh, actually, in my current job, I have to be a learner. So I constantly have to be adaptive because I'm working mostly now with business clients, CEOs. And so I have to be very cognizant of, who they are, where they are. I provide them with a framework to become better leaders. But I have to be adaptive because I want them to end up using my framework to create the best version of themselves. They have their own voice, their own way of dealing with people. And so I want to learn what I can about them to help them develop in their own way. Because you can't become a leader, you can't teach it. You're always becoming a
Mm.
leader. It's a constant learning process. It's very nuanced and very adaptive because whether you're in business or sports, you're always bringing new, different people onto your team, into your company.
What would you say is that framework that you're talking about?
My framework is a little bit different and it's taken from coaching. My framework is based on the origin of the word compete. The current definition of compete is to outdo another for prize, supremacy, acknowledgement, which is a real distortion on the essence of what it means to compete. The origin of the word from late Latin is to strive together. What
Mm.
does that mean? And up until about, I'd say, 27 or so years ago, that was the essence of it. So what does that mean? Well, competing has become viewed as a strictly zero sum endeavor. Destroy or be destroyed. But competing means that if you and I are engaged in an athletic contest, competing, if we're competing, one of us is going to win, one of us is going to lose. If we're in a company and one of us is going to win the project and the other one's not, that's competing. But competing is also debating around a boardroom table an issue. So there's got to be tension. Um, but competitors come out of a competitive experience having viewed the experience as having made each other better. And today it's just that's been lost. It's just zero sum. So the whole notion of winning has become so overrated. Politics is an obvious example, but it's happening everywhere. You lose, I win. The bar is so low, and it's because of we're in an era of personal branding. We used to brand things. Not too long ago, all we branded was things. Now we brand people. So we're not real and we're afraid to compete. So we've invented these other words, not invented actually, cooperate and collaborate, which are good words. Collaborate means to work together. Well, I'd rather work together with you, Bryan, than separate for sure. But what does it mean? It's a mean everything, mean nothing word that every company throws something different at. So I wanted to put a little meat on the bone. Let's not work together. Let's strive together, and let's strive together in four relationships. Relationship to self, that's the internal conversation I have with myself, Bryan, and that's the most important relationship because every action I take starts with that. Am I going to do this? This is hard. Relationship to team, which is a relationship to your peers, boss, and if you have them, direct reports. So I developed an assessment with a professor at the University of Texas that assesses your willingness to strive together in those four relationships. And it's been really, really cool. And the timing is good because we no longer have as many jobs where go build this and it'll last for 10 years and you don't have to deal with the design or marketing, right? Today, we live in an age of abundance. So you better build something that's different. And oh, and by the way, you're going to have to rebuild it probably within a year. So we're living in an era of constant exponential change. So I think so we have to be ready for that mess, that tension, and we have to embrace it.
Is there any way, Jeff, to divert back to what it once was, where there wasn't? I mean, I know what you're doing is helping pave a pathway for people to see the distortions in where now the connotation stands with the word compete. But with everything you're doing as a society beyond that, is there any way to get back to that? Or is this just going to gradually get more and more contentious, more and more metaphorically do or die?
Well, ironically, we didn't need to compete as much in the industrial era, even the information age, because change was incremental. So I delineate between a leader and a manager. A manager tells you, Bryan, do follow me and do your job, right? And here's what it is: build this building, get this equipment, sort of the old assembly line, Henry Ford building the same car, same color, same price over and over and over. Efficiency is the key. Today, productivity is the key. So we have to be ready to strive together. We have to be highly adaptive. The same goes for politics, unless what the problem in politics is not, it is civil discourse for sure, but it's
Yes.
not collaborating and per se and cooperating. It's, do you have I want to ask some of these politicians, do you have the courage to get in? I'm on the other side of the aisle. Do you have the courage to get in the ring with me and compete and come out with something better for the country? Pure and simple. And you've seen examples of this in Biden's administration more than probably the last six combined, bipartisan, long, the building of the kind of competitive relationships that are often very contentious, but their goal is to come out with something better. And that's politics for the country. So, so I
The,
think it's something we desperately need because the pace of change is rapid, and the consequences of not doing it, when you think about climate change and nuclear arms races, are a little bit more catastrophic than, you know, past wars or past world events. So there's a pressing need to do this.
sure, sure. Totally understand what you're saying. And if we go back to when you were coaching at the highest of collegiate levels, how do you get away from this undeniable reality of there's going to be a champion and there's only going to be one, and that sure everybody brings it, but there's this idea even in the nuclear granular sense of sports that not everybody is going to get a trophy, but you also, even if it's not what they're holding in their hands, how do you get them to feel like they're striving together and not feeling the letdown of feeling like a failure if said team, if said person doesn't reach the apex of their sport?
Right. Well, goal setting is another thing that's so overrated. Okay, I'm in my team meeting before the season. What's our goal? Win the conference championship or win national championship. Oh, good. Now that that's out of the way, by the way, that's what every other team wants to do. You cannot. The problem is you cannot control that. So yes, we want to do that, but you're if you're on my team, Brian, I evaluate your commitment to winning based on your commitment to competing, and competing to me is moving out of your comfort zone to tackle very difficult problems, learn new things, and persevere through that process. The whole grit thing is so overrated. It takes grit for me to mow my lawn 100 degrees. I'm sure it takes grit to run a marathon, but and truly, but you're not solving problems. So I would create problem solving scenarios instead of you against Joe, play to 11, loser does push-ups. That's pointless because you could lose to Joe and Joe didn't, made 16 unforced errors. So I put parameters. A basketball example would be very simple one because I was a basketball coach as well. Okay, 3-on-3 defense. You get the ball when a number of things happen. You got to make 2 stops in a row, and each of those stops you got to get the rebound. And each of those stops, everybody has to be boxing out. So they get. I used to do this. They make 2 stops. They do all those things, and I pause and I go, do it again. And this time the ball has to drop on the ground. You have to box out. I make that's a very simple example. Or you have to reverse the ball twice and do 2 post entries, re-entries before you can score. Something to make them solve a problem, because if all we do is drill, 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 repetitions and patterns, well, I can't make an agreement with you before I play you in tennis or basketball. Hey, I've worked on this pattern. Can we practice that? There's no cooperating involved here. So my players have to compete internally during practice, make each other suffer, make each other problem solve. So we're ready for the enemy. And what that engendered is a tremendous amount of respect between teammates because it wasn't personal.
Well, I love this conversation because I think we're going to get more and more philosophical here. And Jeff Moore's with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. And the way that we learn, we're going to school, we go to college, we learn about certain topics and ideals and what society should be or where we're going. And to some extent, I wonder, Jeff, if we're taught, and I'm not sure whose responsibility this is, whether that's a guardian, a parent, a mentor, a teacher, how to handle life when life isn't going your way. I think a lot of times we're taught, okay, this is how you're supposed to do it. And then you go from this step to this step, but we're not told what happens or what we need to do if an obstacle runs in our way and something that we're not prepared for happens. Where do you think that comes from in a society where we're told that this is how you're supposed to do things to get to where you want to go, but we're not told what to do when life isn't going the way it should, and then to maneuver around that?
That's a great question because I think today what we're seeing is adults are basically building young people's resumes for them. It's all about that. It's all about construction. So I'm big into educational reform as well. And, traditional education doesn't work anymore. In 1916, John Dewey, very famous educator, philosopher, said, if education could be more about what went into solving the problem than the solution, there would be a revolution. Well, we're 108 years later, and the learning model in schools has never changed. The business model has. Oh, we've got our innovation lab over here. Well, by the way, you don't get grades for that, but go have fun. We're innovative. We do this, or we use project based learning. The only time learning happens, and you know this from your job, and I know it from my job, but is when you, in a classroom, is when you hear something in a classroom that inspires you to create access to your own learning. So you engage in a discussion, you go home and read about it, you go to the professor after hours. Otherwise, what's been proven is the problem with schools is when you learn something that you know you're going to be tested on, you don't learn, you ingest, you regurgitate, and then research shows You forget there was a study done at Lawrenceville, a prestigious private school. Kids took class took a physics test. Average grade was B plus. They gave them the same test 3 months later. Average grade was F. So
Mm.
because they just taken all this disassociated, detached information, they hadn't used it. And that used to work because again, change was incremental. Do this and do your job, follow through. But now, um, I had a company that was helping colleges identify at-risk students and helping at-risk students identify what courses to take. And the company said, "We love your assessment and we'd like to use it." I said, "Well, how?" "Well, we can predict student success, but we can't predict life success. That any of this that's happening in schools, to your point, will." I said, "Well, I can help." And they said, "Where's your data?" I go, "There's no data." "You mean what they earn?" Or because to your point, when you go into the real world, you're challenged to solve problems. And in many cases, as Laszlo Bock, the first chief people officer of Google, said, "I can play the game of school." But he didn't look at, when he was with Google, they didn't look at transcripts. Because he said, "I can play the game of school, but we're solving problems that don't have answers."
Let me leave you with it.
Adults.
Yeah, and let me leave you with this, Jeff. Jeff Moore with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Final question for you here. With the way your career has turned into to working with coaches, working in leadership with companies, what are you getting out of this?
I'm the only thing that I'm not getting is I'm not part of a team and I don't have my own team. But what I am getting, I've probably learned more in the last 12 years that I've done this than the previous whatever, because I'm now in a leader's element and learning, whoa, there's way more than one way to skin a cat with this deal. So I'm learning constantly. And again, I have to be adaptive. So it's been a lot of fun in that respect to do that, including from people like you, watching what you do. Boy, I watch it on TV and I thought, "Oh, I could do that." And then I get in the booth with you. No, I don't think I could do
That
that.
is, please don't sell yourself short. That was a lot of fun. I think you brought some great analysis. And what I love, I'm always learning. Like, I love what you hit on. And if there's a theme or one of the themes of this conversation is life is more fun when there's that constant, never ending, undying desire to want to learn. It doesn't matter what it is.
Right,
Every day, what am I learning? That to me draws a purpose out of life. It doesn't matter, yeah, what it is. And so, like as a broadcaster, I'm studying and learning every day. How do I get better? How do I get better? I know that you're doing the same thing in a variety of different facets.
right.
So to be able to share that moment with you on that broadcast and to be able to do that with you was so much fun. And I just thought that as soon as we got going, we clicked and I really hope that we get to do that again
It would
and
be a blast.
it'd call
Yeah,
some more tennis as well. Jeff
yeah.
Moore, I'm Bryan Fenley. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this. Really enjoyed the conversation. We went into a lot of different places, and what I loved about it is that we went underneath the surface. That's the only way I like to do conversations, and
Me
that is how
too.
you roll, and I appreciate you for that.
Great questions, Brian. Thanks for having me.